I still remember that fateful afternoon vividly. The gentle, cool air of the park, children's laughter bursting like crystal shards against the golden sunlight. I, Lena, a struggling freelance journalist, camera clutched in hand, was hunting for slices of life, for stories hidden within the city's frantic rhythm. It was how I made a living. Or at least, how I tried to believe I was. I often came to this park, where small tales often found me, where life's hidden corners often revealed themselves through the lens of a curious and hungry observer. And then I saw him. Keon. From that first moment, he stood out from the crowd like a block of dark marble in a vibrant flower garden. Not because of a flashy appearance, but because of a strange energy, an imposing yet silent aura, like a storm asleep beneath an ordinary veneer. He sat on a worn stone bench, a stark contrast to the charcoal-colored leather jacket and the gleaming black boots he wore. His face was chiseled, concealing a deep mystery, illuminated by the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves. He wasn't playing with the little girl beside him, an adorable child with chestnut curls and big, sparkling eyes. He was simply watching, his gaze fixed on her, as if guarding the most precious treasure of his life from every invisible danger. His concentration was almost an expression of obsession, a devotion that was slightly terrifying. The little girl, Mia, seemed accustomed to her father's solemn silence. She ran and played freely, her giggles echoing, but occasionally she'd look up at him, seeking confirmation or simply a small nod. And each time, a rare, fragile tenderness, like a wisp of smoke, would flicker across Keon's deep-set eyes. It was that contradictory moment that drew my lens. I took the shot. A close-up of his face, where authority and anxiety strangely merged. And another, capturing his strong arm holding his daughter's hand, revealing a faint, complex black tattoo on his wrist, seemingly concealing a dark story I couldn't decipher. I didn't know what I'd photographed. A secret code, a mark of a guilty past, or simply a meaningless piece of art. But the moment I lowered my camera, his eyes suddenly turned toward me. A knife-sharp stare pierced through every layer of pretense, sending a shiver down my spine. There was no anger, no surprise, just a deadly coldness, a clear awareness of my presence and, perhaps, of what I'd just done. I felt utterly exposed, every thought, every motive laid bare beneath that gaze. My heart pounded, a sudden bad omen engulfing the space. I hurried away, trying to maintain composure, but the feeling of being watched clung to me. The camera in my hand suddenly felt heavy, as if carrying a burden of guilt I hadn't meant to create. I quickened my pace, each step a ringing alarm bell in my head. The feeling was undeniable. It wasn't the usual fear of a woman alone at night. It was an instinctive warning of a greater, deeper danger, something I'd never experienced. Moments later, as I turned into the familiar narrow alley leading to my apartment, darkness had fallen, swallowing the last streaks of twilight. The footsteps behind me suddenly accelerated. I panicked and turned around. Two tall figures, appearing and disappearing from behind the foul-smelling dumpsters, their faces obscured by caps in the darkness. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I knew I had made a mistake. I had crossed an invisible line, encroached upon a world I didn't belong to. The camera suddenly became evidence, an undeniable indictment. I tried to run, but fear had locked my feet. A rough hand grabbed my shoulder, yanking hard. The camera fell to the ground, shattering like a broken dream. I stumbled, feeling a painful blow to my head. The smell of damp earth and the heavy breathing of my attackers engulfed me. "What did you see?" A rough voice growled, full of menace. "What you saw, you'll regret." In that moment of extreme panic, a sharp sound sliced through the air. An unmistakable sound. The crunch of breaking bones. I looked up, my vision blurred with pain. Keon's tall, terrifyingly familiar silhouette appeared like a ghost in the darkness. He moved like lightning, without a sound. It wasn't a man, but a controlled maelstrom of violence. One attacker was hurled against the old brick wall, making a dry impact. The other, a gleaming knife in his hand, was caught by the neck before he could react, lifted clean off the ground. Not a word, not a warning. Only deadly silence. I saw the brutality in his eyes, a coldness like ice. He didn't hesitate, showed no emotion. He was a living weapon, a predator at the top of the food chain. He decisively snapped the man's neck, the sickening sound echoing in the night. The other attacker, however tough, was ruthlessly beaten down. Everything happened too fast, too violently, for me to process. 1 second, I was facing death. The next, my foes were gone, or lying motionless at the feet of this mysterious man. He turned to look at me, his face still expressionless, but something in his eyes had changed. It was no longer suspicion or threat. Instead, there was a flash of concern, a deep-seated care I couldn't explain. He knelt beside me, his rough fingers gently touching the cut on my forehead. "Are you all right?" His voice was unusually deep and warm, completely contrasting with his recent brutal actions. It wasn't a casual question. It held a command, a near absolute, unshakable protection. He gently helped me up, his solid arm wrapping around me, as if I were a precious object needing protection from every scratch. The faint smell of gunpowder hung in the air, or was it just my imagination? No. It was the scent of danger, the scent of the world he belonged to. I leaned against his solid chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart through the leather jacket. A strange safety enveloped me, but it was accompanied by a profound fear. This man. Who was he? He saved me, but the way he did it terrified me. He was a ghost from the past, a predator always lurking in the shadows, and now, somehow, I had become a part of it. He looked down at the wreckage of my camera, then back at me. "What did you photograph?" His voice was calm, but I felt the weight of the question. I tremblingly recounted the photo, the faint tattoo on his wrist, the look in his eyes when I accidentally caught him. He listened in silence, his eyes scanning me as if reading every thought in my head. A moment of contemplation, then he nodded. "You saw what you shouldn't have." It wasn't an accusation, but a cold confirmation. "And now, you are mine." The phrase echoed in the darkness, not a declaration of love, but a proclamation of ownership, a promise of protection. But also a sentence. In his arms, in the dark alley with the lingering scent of blood and fear, I found myself lost in a new world. A world where ordinary rules didn't exist, where power was defined by strength and ruthlessness. I had been plunged into this abyss not by choice, but because fate had led me to this man. A man with the appearance of a dark god, who saved me from death, but who also dragged me into a dangerous web from which I could not escape. I looked up at him, his eyes holding an inscrutable complexity. The tenderness he showed me completely contradicted the brutality he had just displayed. It was a haunting paradox. He was a loving father, an uncompromising protector, but also a cold-blooded predator. What had made him this way? What obsession drove him to the edge between light and dark? I couldn't stop wondering. What was he hiding? And what would happen to me, Lena, an ordinary, weak woman, now that I had touched his world? The feeling of being pulled, of being drawn in by his strong gravitational force, made me both afraid and curious. He was a threat, yet also a sanctuary. Danger and safety merged, creating a complex, addictive emotion. He was my worst nightmare, but also my most mysterious dream. And I wondered, was that brutal protection a promise, or an invisible handcuff? The first light of morning filtered through the thick curtains, casting a golden hue over the luxurious room I never imagined I'd step into. I woke up on a huge, cloud-soft bed, the cold silk sheets caressing my skin. Everything around me exuded elegance and refinement, but also a sense of coldness and distance. The spacious room, minimalist yet sophisticated, offered a panoramic view of a meticulously manicured garden and, further beyond, a dense, vast forest. This was a completely different world from my cramped, dusty apartment. I realized I was in a secluded mansion, hidden within a vast estate, enveloped by a terrifying silence. I didn't know how long I had slept, or how I had been brought here. The last memory was the darkness of the alley, the scent of blood, and Keon's solid embrace. Now, everything felt like a dream both terrifying and surreal. I stood up, feeling the softness of the sheepskin rug beneath my feet. Walking to the window, I looked out. There was no sign of a city. Just trees, rolling hills, and a clear lake shimmering in the early sun. This wasn't a place to escape. This was a fortress, a sanctuary built to protect and to imprison. A clean, perfectly fitting set of clothes was laid out on a chair. I changed, feeling the smoothness of the high-quality fabric. Everything here was meticulously taken care of, down to the smallest detail. When I opened the door, a long corridor, paved with gleaming marble, appeared. Not a soul in sight. The silence enveloped the house, making me feel like the sole survivor in an abandoned palace. I descended the spiral staircase, touching the exquisitely carved ebony banister. Each step echoed, drowning me in a sense of solitude. I found him in a vast library, overflowing with books from floor to ceiling, with a large stone fireplace crackling softly. He was sitting at an antique oak table, focused on a laptop and a stack of documents. The light from the fireplace highlighted his sharp, angular features. Next to him, little Mia was engrossed in coloring in a book. This scene was a complete contrast to the coldness and brutality I had witnessed last night. This man, a predator, could be so peaceful next to his daughter. He looked up as I entered, Keon's deep blue eyes sweeping over me again, without an ounce of surprise. "Did you sleep well?" His voice was still warm, but concealed an undeniable control. "Sit down." He gestured to the chair opposite him. I obeyed, feeling like a controlled puppet. Little Mia looked up at me, her big eyes sparkling. "Hello, miss." She smiled innocently, her presence the only bright spot in this somber space. I nodded, trying to return the smile. "You probably have a lot of questions," Keon said calmly, setting the stack of documents aside. "And I will answer them." He looked straight into my eyes, without flinching. "I am not a normal single father, Lena. I am a former agent who worked for a secret government organization. An organization established to deal with problems that the law could not touch." He paused, allowing me to process the information. 2 years ago, I was framed, accused of a crime I did not commit. A terrible act of terrorism, which took the lives of hundreds of innocent people, including Mia's mother. A flicker of pain, almost imperceptible, crossed his eyes. I was stunned. Framed? But why? To cover up a larger conspiracy, he said, his voice sharp. A deep-seated network of corruption, involving high-ranking officials and an international corporation. They wanted to eliminate me because I was getting too close to the truth. They wanted me to take the fall, so they could continue to manipulate everything in the shadows. He took a sip of black coffee. Since then, I have been a fugitive, a traitor in the public eye. But I have not stopped seeking justice. Not just for me, but for the dead, and for Mia. So, why did you save me last night? I asked, my voice trembling. And why bring me here? His gaze turned cold again. Your attackers were not petty thieves. They belonged to that organization. They recognized my tattoo. It is the insignia of my unit, a symbol only those connected to this network would know. They knew you had photographed me. They thought you were part of the investigation, or at least, a dangerous witness. He took a sip of coffee. Anyone who touches my world cannot leave without consequences. And once you saw what you saw, you became their target. I could not let them take you. But why me? I felt suffocated. I know nothing about your world. You have something I need, he said, his eyes boring into mine. Your skills. Your subtle observation. Your ability to see small details, hidden stories. And your camera, though destroyed, gave me a hint. I need someone who can see things others cannot. Someone who can record them objectively. I need you to expose the truth. He stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the forest. I don't just want to protect you. I want you to be my partner. His offer was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was an escape from fear, a chance for me to better understand this mysterious man, and perhaps a chance to get out of this vortex. On the other hand, it was an invitation further into his dark world, a world I knew nothing about, a world that could swallow me whole at any moment. I looked at him, the man who was both a fugitive, a loving father, and a cold predator. What if I refuse? I asked, my voice challenging. He turned back, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. You don't have a choice, Lena. You have been mine from the moment I saved you, and wherever you go, they will find you. Only here, next to me, are you safe? He walked closer to me, placing a hand on my shoulder, a light touch but full of authority. This is my world, and now you are a part of it. I will not let anyone harm you. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration, a promise. And I wondered, was that promise a form of protection or a sentence on my life? In the days that followed, I was swept into a completely new routine. Keon didn't just shelter me. He began to train me, teaching me self-defense, how to recognize danger, how to secretly gather information. He showed me how to use high-tech equipment, how to track and analyze data. I realized that my photography and observation skills, seemingly useless in this world, had become a powerful tool. I began to look for small details in classified documents, faces hidden behind the curtain, unexpected connections. Every night, Keon would tell me more about his world, about the dark conspiracies, about the people he was hunting. His voice was deep and sharp, but sometimes I'd catch fleeting moments of tenderness, especially when he mentioned Mia. Keon had an obsession with injustice, with the strong preying on the weak. This, he explained, stemmed from the death of Mia's mother, an innocent woman who became a victim of ruthlessness and greed. He also shared a vague memory of a cousin, a victim of domestic violence when he was young, whom he couldn't protect. These pains had turned him into the man he was now, a man cold and ruthless to his enemies, but with an unexpected weakness for vulnerable women and children. I began to see other facets of this man. He read classical philosophy, listened to deep jazz, and spent hours teaching Mia how to draw. He was an excellent father, gentle and patient with his daughter. Mia loved Keon unconditionally, her eyes sparkling every time he smiled at her. I also began to get used to his presence, to his powerful stillness. The fear slowly gave way to respect, and a forbidden feeling began to bloom in me. I knew it was wrong. I knew he was a dangerous man, a wanted man, a man living outside the law, but I couldn't deny the attraction he held. The absolute safety he created around me was an addictive drug. In his arms, I felt protected from all the dangers of the outside world. My heart, which had been hardened by a tough life, suddenly beat with strange rhythms whenever he touched me, whenever his gaze lingered on me a little longer. On long nights when I couldn't sleep, I often secretly watched him through the crack of the library door, where he worked tirelessly. His face was tense, his eyes concealing fatigue and pain. I knew he was carrying a tremendous burden. And slowly, I no longer saw him as my captor, but as a man fighting for truth and justice, a man trying to protect his family at all costs. I began to believe his story, to believe his mission. But there were also moments when the fear resurfaced. I hated myself for being drawn to such a dangerous man. Was I losing my mind? Was I falling into a deadly emotional trap? Who was I to judge him? I was just an outsider, a weak woman, accidentally pushed into his world. Would I be strong enough to survive in this world, or would I just be another victim, crushed by the gears of power and violence? I recalled the night he saved me, his brutality, his deadly coldness. It made me shiver. But then I remembered the way he looked at Mia, the way he placed his hand on my shoulder, the rare tenderness in his eyes. That contradiction tore at my mind. I hated my own weakness for being attracted to him, hated the false sense of security he provided. I was a prisoner, but also a willing participant. A painful internal struggle, a forbidden love blooming in the dark. One afternoon, as I was helping Kian sort through a stack of old documents, I stumbled upon a small, yellowed photograph. It was a picture of a beautiful young woman, with a radiant smile and eyes exactly like Mia's. It was Mia's mother, Kian's wife. I picked up the photo, sensing Kian's sorrow when he saw it. She was a good person, he said, his voice rare in its softness. Too good for this world. He looked at me, his eyes concealing a deep sadness. She believed in justice, believed in the best of humanity, and that is why she died. That look, that moment, touched my heart. I saw a deeply wounded man, a man seeking redemption for his past, a man trying to protect what little he had left. And I realized I was not just a hostage. I was already a part of this fateful drama. I was bound to him by an invisible thread, a thread of life and death, of love and hatred. The atmosphere in the mansion grew increasingly tense, like a violin string stretched to its breaking point, waiting for a small touch to snap. We had worked tirelessly, together flipping through every page of documents, analyzing every piece of the larger picture. I used my skills to organize the fragmented information into a coherent narrative, exposing the horrifying crimes of a corporation named Kronos and its leader, a figure of terrible influence named Victor Thorne. Thorne, a seemingly respectable business mogul, was the man behind every conspiracy, the one who framed Kian and was responsible for his wife's death. One fateful evening, as I sat alone in the library, trying to decipher a complex code on the computer, a strange sound echoed from the floor below. A cold, crashing sound, tearing through the silent night. My heart pounded in my chest. Kian was out checking a confidential tip. Only Mia and I were at home, along with a few guards Kian had stationed. I immediately understood. They had arrived. Kian's enemies had found our hiding place. I rushed upstairs to Mia's room, pulling the sleeping child from her bed, hugging her tightly. Shh. Be quiet, my love. My voice trembled, but I tried to remain calm for her. Mia, still groggy, clung to me. I heard the crackle of gunfire from downstairs, the hurried, rough footsteps, the screams of the guards. The mansion, once a peaceful fortress, had turned into a bloody battlefield. I knew I couldn't escape. They would find me. They would find Mia. In that moment of utter despair, I heard the roar of an engine outside. It was Kian's car. He had returned. A sudden relief washed over me, immediately followed by a new wave of fear. He would have to face them alone. I held Mia tight, whispering reassurances, but my eyes never left the door. The gunfire and screams suddenly stopped. An ominous silence engulfed the space. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy, resolute, approaching the stairs. Not the attackers. It was Kian's footsteps. He appeared at Mia's doorway, his entire body covered in dust and perhaps blood. His face was cold as ice, his eyes burning red like hellfire. I had never seen him so angry. It wasn't ordinary anger. It was a primal rage, a protective instinct triggered to its absolute limit. Lena, Mia. Are you both all right? His voice was a guttural, hoarse growl, full of lethal intent. I rushed to him, checking his body. There were no major injuries, but his shirt was ripped, revealing solid muscles and a few scratches. We're fine, I said, tears welling up. But what happened? He didn't answer. He just stared into the space behind me, where the attackers had just broken in. Then he turned, his eyes resting on Mia, who was clutching me, trembling. A flicker of tenderness crossed his eyes before it became cold as ice again. They dared. He clenched his fist, his knuckles white. They dared to set foot on my territory, dared to touch what is mine. His voice was no longer that of an ordinary man. It was the voice of an avenging god, an absolute ruler. He turned to me, his gaze piercing me, without a trace of doubt or hesitation. I will show them the price of touching you. He bent down, placing a fierce, violent kiss on my lips. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of possession, of a vow of protection, of a forbidden love ignited amid chaos and violence. His tongue gently traced mine, exploring, like an irreversible commitment. I felt my whole body ignite, a flame erupting between fear and desire. The kiss lasted, intense, as if trying to consume me into his world. I responded instinctively, all my fear, all my internal struggles melting away. In that moment, there was only him, his protection, and his irresistible allure. He released me, his eyes still burning, but with a softness, almost a desperation. I will be back, and when I return, you will be mine, forever. He turned and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. I stood there, heart pounding, my lips still feeling the warmth of his kiss. The fear was still present, but now it was mixed with a more intense emotion. Love. Love for this dangerous man, the man who had turned my life into a nightmare, and who had also given me a sense of security I had never known. I heard the roar of his car engine again, the tires screeching on the gravel road as he sped off into the night. I hugged Mia tight, the baby fast asleep in my arms, completely unaware of the storm that had just swept through her life. I looked out the window, where the headlights of his car faded. I knew what he would do. He would show no mercy. He would destroy all those who dared to threaten us. And I realized I was no longer afraid of him. I had accepted his world, accepted his brutality, because I knew that all of it stemmed from a single desire: to protect those he loved. I had become a part of it, a part of his family, a part of his goal. He returned after dawn, with tired eyes but a look of victory. He said nothing about what had happened, but I knew. I knew he had finished his work. I knew that those who dared to attack us had paid the price. The scent of blood and coldness still lingered on him, but I was no longer horrified. Instead, there was an admiration, an acceptance. He had protected me, protected Mia, and that was all that mattered. We sat in the library, and Kian told me everything. Victor Thorne was an international drug lord, money launderer, and the man behind a series of political assassinations. He had used his position to manipulate the market, bribe officials, and create a massive criminal empire. He had framed Kian to eliminate a potential threat, the only person capable of exposing the truth. He has one weakness, Kian said, his voice cold. He has a daughter he loves more than anything. And he has done everything to protect her from his dark world. A cruel smirk appeared on his lips. He has broken every rule, crossed every boundary to keep the secret of the girl. But now, that secret will be his downfall. I understood his meaning. He would use the information about Thorne's daughter to force him out of hiding, to drag him into the light. It was a dangerous plan, a plan that required ruthlessness and decisiveness. What will you do? I asked, my voice slightly trembling. I will show him what loss feels like, Kian said, his eyes bloodshot. I will make him go through the pain he caused me, Mia's mother. He clenched his fist, his knuckles white. He will pay the price. His entire network will collapse. And everyone will know the truth. He looked at me, his eyes holding something I had never seen before. It was determination, vengeance, but also an unshakable belief. You have helped me so much, Lena. The information you collected, the pieces you put together. They are the key. He stood up, walking toward me, placing a hand on my cheek. And because of that, you are mine. Completely mine. My heart tightened. His declaration wasn't a question. It was an assertion. I was no longer a free woman. I belonged to him, to his dangerous world, to his mission. And I wondered, was that a promise or a sentence of devotion? The following days passed like a dark dream, every moment breathlessly tense. I was no longer Lena, the timid freelance journalist. I had become a part of Keon's world, a quiet yet essential shadow by his side. With him, I tracked Victor Thorne, following every clue, every transaction, every secret meeting. We infiltrated complex computer systems, deciphered heavily encrypted information, and used every surveillance technique Keon had taught me. Every action I took was closely monitored by Keon, not because he didn't trust me, but because he didn't want me to take any risks. He had become my shadow, the one who shielded me from all dangers. There were times when I was horrified by myself. I had witnessed horrific crimes, evidence of human brutality and greed. I had seen Keon do things a normal person couldn't imagine to gather information, to force traitors into submission. He didn't hesitate to use violence, to use fear to achieve his goals. But every time he did it, I remembered Mia, the death of his wife, the obsession with injustice. And I wondered, was I becoming like him? Was this dark world swallowing my conscience? But then, I looked into his eyes that concealed a deep pain, an unwavering resolve. And I knew he did all of this not for power, not for personal gain. He did it for justice, for those who were hurt, for a safer future for Mia. And that made me love him more, love his complex, contradictory nature. I loved his ruthlessness when it was directed at those who deserved it, loved his gentleness when it was reserved for me and Mia. The final plan was laid out. Keon decided to confront Victor Thorne directly at his private villa in the suburbs. It was a highly protected location, with dozens of heavily armed mercenaries. We knew it was a dangerous gamble, one that could cost both of our lives. But Keon was not afraid. He had been waiting for this moment for too long. That night, before leaving, he came to me. Mia was fast asleep in the next room. He placed his hand on my cheek, his thumb gently stroking my cheekbone. If anything happens. His voice was deep, but concealed a profound sense of loss. Take care of Mia. You are all I have left. I shook my head, tears streaming down. No, nothing will happen. You will come back. We will finish this together. I hugged him tight, inhaling his distinctive masculine scent. It was the scent of gunpowder, sweat, danger, and love. You're not going alone. I'll be here, supporting you remotely. I will be your eyes. I was ready, all communication devices hidden. He looked at me, a small, rare smile appearing on his lips. Yes, you are mine, and I won't let anything harm you. It wasn't a promise, but a vow. The vow of a man who had lost everything, and now had only one thing left to protect: his family. Keon infiltrated Thorne's villa alone. I sat in the secret control room, monitoring his every move through the security cameras we had hacked into. I was his eyes, his ears, guiding him through the maze of corridors and deadly traps. Every time he dodged a bullet, every time he took down a guard, my heart clenched. I knew he was risking his life, not just for himself, but for me, for Mia. The final confrontation took place in a large, luxurious room where Victor Thorne was waiting, a smug smile on his face. Keon, my old friend, I've been waiting for you. Thorne's voice echoed with mockery. Keon said nothing. He just charged, like a demon from hell. The fight was brutal, ruthless. Thorne was not weak. He was also well-trained, and he had a formidable army of mercenaries. Gunshots rang out, metal clanging, the screams of those fighting. I watched through the screen, feeling helpless, but I knew I had to stay calm. I had to be his anchor. Keon fought like a cornered beast. He wasn't just a warrior. He was unleashed fury. He dodged bullets, countered decisively, and took down each soldier ruthlessly. But Thorn was also cunning. He had set traps everywhere, and he knew every weakness of the villa. In a moment of vulnerability, a soldier shot from behind. Kian turned, but not in time. The bullet lodged in his shoulder, bright red blood soaking his shirt. I screamed, my heart shattering into pieces. "Kian! Be careful!" I yelled into the microphone, my voice choked with fear. He didn't reply. He just gritted his teeth, drew his knife, and continued to fight. The physical pain seemed not to affect him. The anger, the vengeance had consumed every other sensation. He lunged at Thorn, with nothing left to lose. The battle between the two men unfolded like a dance of death. Thorn used vicious moves, trying to exploit Kian's injury. But Kian, though wounded, was stronger, more determined. He grabbed Thorn's arm, decisively breaking it. The dry crunch of bone echoed. Thorn screamed in agony. Finally, Kian cornered Thorn. He knelt down, staring at his enemy. His eyes were bloodshot, his face smeared with dust and blood. "You took everything from me," he growled, his voice hoarse. "You took my wife, my honor. You nearly took my daughter. And you dared to threaten my woman." He tightened his grip on Thorn's neck, pushing him against the wall. "You will pay the price. With everything you have." I watched through the screen, tears streaming down my cheeks. I was horrified by the brutality, but I also understood. I understood his pain, understood his vengeance. And I knew he did it not just for himself, but for all of Thorn's victims. Kian didn't kill Thorn. He let him live, but not out of mercy. He would turn Thorn over to the authorities. With all the evidence we had gathered, Thorn would face the law, and he would endure the humiliation, the loss of everything he had built. It was a fate worse than death. When it was over, Kian collapsed, his entire body shaking. He was exhausted. I saw the fatigue on his face, the pain from the wound. But he had done it. He had won. "Kian," I whispered into the microphone, my voice catching. Are you okay?" He didn't reply immediately. He just breathed heavily, trying to stand up. I watched him stumble, blood still oozing from the wound on his shoulder. He was a warrior, a hero, but he was also just a man. And he had paid a heavy price. When he returned to the mansion, I ran to meet him. He collapsed into my arms, his body heavy. The scent of blood and exhaustion enveloped me. I held him tight, whispering words of comfort. "You did it. You won." He looked up at me, his eyes concealing a deep pain, but also a flicker of hope. "I protected you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "And now, you are mine. Forever." Amid the wreckage, I looked into his eyes and realized this love was the redemption for all the darkness he carried. It was the light shining into the hidden corners of his soul, the promise of a future I had never dared to dream of. The following weeks passed in rare tranquility. Victor Thorn was arrested, and with all the undeniable evidence Kian and I had gathered, he was sentenced to the maximum penalty. His criminal network collapsed, and his accomplices were also brought to light. Justice was finally served. Kian was no longer a fugitive, at least in the eyes of those he cared about. His reputation was restored, although he still chose to live in seclusion, away from the spotlight and public attention. He didn't want to return to the old world, the world of conspiracies and violence. He wanted a peaceful life, a life he could dedicate to Mia and me. The wound on Kian's shoulder healed slowly, but the emotional scars were much deeper. He still retained his inherent stillness and authority, but now there was a new softness in his eyes, a peace I had never seen before. He spent more time with Mia, taking her for walks in the forest, teaching her to fish in the lake. Mia's laughter echoed throughout the mansion, bringing a vibrancy it had never had before. We decided to stay in the mansion. It was our safe haven, a fortress built on love and sacrifice. Kian had changed. He was still a powerful man, but he had chosen to use that power to build, to protect, not to destroy. He had atoned for his past, not by forgetting it, but by turning it into the driving force for a better future. One summer afternoon, Kian took me to the back garden, where the roses were blooming. He knelt down, a small velvet box in his hand. "Lena," his voice was deep, carrying a rare emotion. "You entered my life like a storm, breaking every rule, every wall I had built. You saw my darkest side, but you weren't afraid. You fought by my side, believed in me when no one else did. You taught me what love is, what family is." He opened the box. A diamond ring sparkled in the sunlight. "Will you be my wife? Will you be Mia's mother, the mistress of my life, the light of this house?" Tears streamed down my face. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a promise, an eternal vow. I knelt down, hugging him tight. "Yes," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Kian." Forever. Our wedding was simple, intimate, with only 3 people: Kian, Mia, and me. Mia was the little flower girl, beautiful in her pure white dress. Kian, in a sleek black suit, looked like a dark prince who had found his queen. He was no longer a fugitive. He was my husband, Mia's father, the man of the family. Our life gradually stabilized, filled with laughter and happiness. We welcomed a new member, a plump baby boy with Kian's deep blue eyes and my radiant smile. Kian became an exemplary father, a loving husband. He still kept his old habits, still read philosophy books, still practiced martial arts, but now everything was done with a new purpose: to protect our small family. I had found my paradise, not in a distant place, but right in the arms of this dangerous man. He had atoned for his past, and I had also found the meaning of my life. We had built a family, a solid future, not with ordinary romance, but with a forbidden love, a love forged in fire and blood, in darkness and light. And I know, no matter what challenges life throws at us, we will always be together. Kian will always be my protector, my hero, the man who changed my life. He is a single father, a fugitive, but to me, Kian is everything.